Morning, everybody. How is everyone feeling on this Saturday? We are so excited to have you with us. I'm Erica Maldonado Singh. I'm the Assistant Director at the USC Dornsife Center for the Political Future and your host for today. Welcome to the 2021 Young Women's Leadership Conference. This is our 10th Young Women's Leadership Conference, and it's not exactly how we would have imagined celebrating such a milestone, but we're grateful for the opportunity to come together and close out Women's History Month with the next generation of leaders. Give yourselves a round of applause for being present with us this morning and get ready for a fun day. For those of you not familiar with the Center for the Political Future, our mission, to put it simply, is to advance civil dialogue, to bridge the growing divide between political parties and find solutions together, and to train tomorrow's leaders through dynamic programs like today's. The center is led by co-directors Bob Shrum and Mike Murphy, legendary strategists from both sides of the aisle. Bob Shrum is a veteran Democratic strategist who's worked with John Kerry, Al Gore, and most recently, Joe Biden. Mike Murphy is an accomplished Republican strategist who's worked with John McCain and Jeb Bush and is currently a political analyst for NBC. And joining us today is the center's executive director, Kami Akavan. In addition to leading our center, he also teaches a course. Hey, Kami. He teaches a course at USC called Doing Good, How to Start and Run a Successful Nonprofit Organization, where he shares his decades of experience previously serving as CEO of nonprofit news source, procon.org. Kami has been a huge supporter and advocate for continuing the legacy of this conference, and we are very grateful to him. I also want to thank Kelly Corley, whose generous support makes this event possible. The Young Women's Leadership Conference is a highlight every year for many of us at the center, and we are so grateful to her commitment to enriching so many young girls' lives. This conference has helped hundreds of girls become more civically engaged. Some past attendees have gone on to study at USC, have graduated, and have real jobs in politics. You'll get to meet two of them later today. Now, this past year has taught us a lot. We've seen in the pandemic how countries led by women performed better during the crisis, from New Zealand, Taiwan, to Germany. In the US, women make up 26% in the US House of Representatives and 24% in the US Senate. Right now, there are only 8 governors in the US who are women. So we're not quite there yet, but we can celebrate our first woman vice president, Kamala Harris, of course. I could share more stats, but the point is we need more women leaders like you here with us today. We've brought together women leaders from college age to middle age who have lived through it and done the work, and they're here to share with you what they've learned. There's a lot of work to do in this country, so let's roll up our sleeves and get it done. I'm going to review some announcements and quickly review the agenda so we can get to the icebreaker because we are eager to meet all of you. You can find the agenda on our website, and we'll link to it here in the chat as well. And so you can follow along to the agenda. We'll add it on the chat here. But in the meantime, I'm just going to quickly kind of review what we're going to be doing today. So we encourage you all to keep your cameras on. Just mute yourself, please. We want to see your happy, smiling faces today. And we'll be sharing resources using the chat. And we welcome you to ask any questions throughout the day. Hey, hello, good morning. Look at all of you. I love this. I want to emphasize that the center models civil dialogue and a respectful exchange of ideas. So that said, anybody being disruptive will be removed. And we have something special for those who stay until the end. So stick around. Now, please take the next minute to fill out the USC image release form that we're going to drop in the chat here. And so this is just standard procedure. This is to acknowledge we're filming this meeting and taking stills. So I'm going to just pause here for about 10 to 15 seconds while we get this link up, and so that you can quickly just fill it out. So I'm going to do a nice little pregnant pause. And I'm going to put it in the chat. it is. Okay. So there's the release form. And I'm also going to throw in our agenda. So you can also follow along. Throwing a lot at you already. Okay. So agenda for today. California Assemblywoman Wendy Carrillo will be joining us to talk about her path from journalism to California politics. Then we're going to break into smaller groups for a workshop on remixing stories led by Sangeeta Shrestova from USC's Civic Paths group. I want to acknowledge our USC students and staff who are working behind the scenes today. They'll be joining you in the breakout rooms to help guide your projects. Joining us today are USC student leaders Sydney Brown, Chloe Gudino, Chloe Hirth, Taya Heisel, Ria Mehta, and Sophia Perez. These women have interned on Capitol Hill with Congress members and district attorneys. Some are joining us from DC and are working in political internships right now. These women leaders are serving on campus organizations like Vote SC, Unruh Associates, Lean In USC, Society for Women in the Law, Dornsife Ambassadors, Troy Camp, and Hermanas Unidas. And I can keep going on, but I'll just leave it there. So a special thank you to them for joining us today. They, along with our CPF team, Christy Plaza, Nicole Pompilio, and Harry Burke, will be joining us today. They're here to support you. So if you can't remember all of those names, just look for anyone who has USC/CPF after their names. They're here to support you today. After our workshop, it's a lunch hour, so make sure to eat something. And then we'll hear from Jennifer Cox from the USC Office of Admissions. She'll share what it takes to get into one of the best colleges in the world. And then you'll hear from past attendees on how to kickstart your leadership journey. So after the lunch hour, we're going to jump back into breakout rooms where you'll meet with some amazing women leaders from different fields of politics and hear about the cool work that they do. I'll explain how that's going to work a little later. We're so pleased to have Assemblywoman Wendy Carrillo, I believe, is joined us. So it is my great honor and pleasure to introduce today's keynote speaker, California Assemblywoman Wendy Carrillo. She was elected to serve in the California State Assembly in December 2017. Her district encompasses East and Northeast Los Angeles in the neighborhoods of El Sereno, Echo Park, Lincoln Heights, Chinatown, and parts of Silver Lake. Prior to being elected to office, Assemblywoman Carrillo was a broadcast journalist for 12 years, covering human rights, global conflict, and U.S. politics. She co-founded Reported.ly in 2014, an award-winning social media startup. And she's a USC alumni and earned her master's degree in journalism and political science. So I want to welcome Assemblywoman Carrillo. Thank you for joining us today.
Good morning. Can you hear me okay?
We can, yes, thank you.
Great. Well, good morning. It's so great to see all of you via Zoom, and thank you for this incredible opportunity. I'm proud to represent the 51st Assembly District, which includes the communities of Northeast LA and East Los Angeles, where I grew up and where I was raised. And I want to thank the Center for Political Future at USC for inviting me to participate. I am so honored and thrilled to just join you. And I'm so heartened by the attendance to this Zoom conference, but actually not surprised at all. Across the country, young women are stepping up and stepping out and really showing the power of the female vote, of the encouragement of the hashtag persist, which is why I chose to run for office to begin with. And your voices are critical now more so than ever before, especially given the last 4 years that we've had in the administration, what the future of our country looks like, and really the opportunity for young people to really engage in the political process and let your voices be heard. Now this is actually the largest in the state legislature. This is the largest women's caucus we have ever had. We had more women elected now than previously. We have more Latinos elected into office. The Latino caucus is also the largest for all the ethnic caucuses in the state of California. And I'm just honored, you know, to be able to represent the community that I grew up in. I'll share just a little bit of my upbringing. And Erica, I'm also open to the fireside chat and dialogue conversation. But I'll just share a little bit about me. I was born in El Salvador during the Civil War. My parents immigrated to the U.S. We actually fled the Civil War between the ages of 5 and 13. I, like many young kids who came from Central America during that time, was undocumented. And I didn't know that I was undocumented. I was lucky and fortunate that my parents were able to hire an attorney and file paperwork when I was just a little girl, when I was just 5. And it took that length of time, from 5 to 13, for our paperwork to, you know, follow the process. And that's when I learned that I was undocumented but had received permanent residency. And so I became a resident and had to wait another few years in order to even be able to apply to be a citizen. So I became a citizen before my 21st birthday. I'm the oldest of 5 daughters. So I come from a hardworking immigrant class, working class family from Boyle Heights in East LA. And I was the first one in my family to be able to register to vote. So my one vote counted for 7 people until my younger sisters were able to turn 18, and they were born in the US, they were born in Boyle Heights. They were able to turn 18 and register to vote and became voters. My mom became a citizen under Obama, and she has her frame up in the wall and very proud. And my dad's in the process of becoming a citizen. And I share that story because I believe that that is the story of the immigrant first generation American experience that is happening across the country. And when we put our voices and our experience at the table, they help change the conversation. I will share one quote that really inspires me. I'm a romantic. I'm not afraid to admit it. But in the very early foundings of this nation, John Adams was in France trying to raise money for the Revolutionary War. And he wrote a love letter to his wife, Abigail. And in this letter, he said, I miss you, and the gardens here at Versailles are beautiful. I wish I could take all the time to explain it to you, but I have to get back to work. And in the letter, he writes, I must go study politics and war so that our children have the freedom to study mathematics and science, so that their children have the liberty to study art and music. And that still gives me chills, because I think that is the founding and the promise of this nation that we all have, regardless of where you come from, what you look like, what language you speak, or what your legal status is. This country belongs to all of us, not just a few. And all of you that are participating today have a responsibility to really create the type of nation that is inclusive, that has opportunities, that is just, and that really brings people together. And so I'm inspired to join you. I'm inspired to continue talking. I'm inspired to hear from you as well. And thank you again for the opportunity.
Thank you so much for that, Assemblywoman Carrillo. So, you mentioned you're an Angelino through and through, grew up in Boyle Heights, Park Terrace, with more than a decades-long career in journalism. So I have to ask this first question. What motivated the transition to the state assembly?
So thank you for the question. It was 2016. The startup that I was working at folded. And so it must have been August and September that I decided, we all go through this phase that we want to do a cross-country trip just in the car. And I had never done it. And so I said, well, this is the moment. I don't have a job. I have some savings. So I rented a car, and me and my dog traveled across the country, went from LA to New Orleans. And then from New Orleans, we went up to Standing Rock. And I was pitching stories at this time. So I was pitching to like audio stories or digital stories. And I went up to Standing Rock, North Dakota. And I was only going to be there for about 2 weeks. And this was during the North Dakota Access Pipeline protests. And I ended up staying there for 3 months and really submerged myself in this community. And then I saw the results of the November 2016 election. And I remember feeling, as an immigrant, as a woman, as a formerly undocumented person, that all of the narratives that we heard during the election were really targeted toward communities like mine. And there was an opportunity where my member of Congress, Javier Becerra, was tapped to be the Attorney General because Kamala Harris had become the U.S. Senator. I'm sorry, yes, the U.S. Senator for the state of California. And so it created this ripple effect, and this congressional election, this congressional seat in my community opened up. And I thought, if not now, when? And if not me, who? And how can I best represent all of the things that are my community in this special election? So my election was the first one after the 2016 election. And it was short, it was 3 weeks, 3 months, I'm sorry. And I didn't win, but part of the lesson that I will share with you in losing is how to lose with dignity and how to lose with grace, and that you're not always going to win the first time. And it is how you pick yourself up and dust yourself off and show up again that matters. So I didn't win my first congressional election, and I decided I wasn't going to run for the assembly seat. And I remember thinking, when I ran the first time, I was up for a really important job at CNN, and I put it on pause. And it was everything that I had ever worked on was at that moment, and I put it on pause to run for office, and I lost. And I thought, oh my God, what did I just do with my life? But decided to keep going. And so I decided to run for the assembly seat. I was the only woman that ran against 11 other men, and really had to push, and ended up winning. And so to answer the question, Erica, it was really all about how can I best represent my communities, and how can I take my experiences to a place where voices like mine are not often heard, and just changing direction completely and being unapologetic and unafraid of what that looked like.
That's great. Thank you so much. And I got kicked out in the middle of that, but I think you answered it. It sounded like you were on a roll, so we're just going to go with that. So can you tell us a little bit, I know you're the chair of the select committee on uplifting girls and women of color in California. Can you tell us a little bit about what that committee does and what your role is there?
So it's actually a new committee that it's a select committee, which means in addition to everything else, it's what we want to focus on. And so a few years ago, the state of California became predominantly Latino or Latinx, and the number one growing population across the state are young Latinas, young women. And we thought, well, how can we best figure out ways to talk about the issues that impact young girls and women of color, and how can we bring voices together to really talk about the intersection between various different ethnicities and young girls, and really just use this select committee as a way to talk about all the different issues. It could be mental health, education, future planning, women in the workforce, young women of color in Hollywood or in the music industry, whatever we want. We get an opportunity to create that narrative and really showcase the diversity, the richness, and really what the investing in young girls and women of color could really look like for the state of California. And I hope to be able to partner with all of you on this call, because I can tell that we have the same goals and vision in mind.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that was going to be my follow-up. How can the girls joining us today, learn more about it, get involved, and we'll be happy to share any resources afterward with our group. So we talked about you grew up in Boyle Heights and Park Terrace, graduated from Roosevelt High School, where you served as class president in your sophomore year. How different is your life than what you imagined it to be at that age? Tell us about that. How was that campaign experience in 10th grade at Roosevelt High School?
That was the first time I ran for office was to be president of my sophomore class at Roosevelt High School. And it was really great. I was in leadership, and I brought a diverse group of students together. It was like the jocks and the football players and the math club, and everybody coming together to support my campaign. But I ended up winning, and there's always a point in your life where you're going to experience some kind of hardship. So as I shared with you earlier about being formally undocumented, the mental drain of that, and the drain to the emotional drain on a young 13-year-old girl, as well as if you think of the experience my mom was having at the same time, made our relationship really difficult when I was a little girl, when I was younger, when I was a teenager. And I started acting out. And I recently shared a photo on Facebook where I'm 15 years on my Instagram, and where I'm 15 years old and I'm ditching school and I'm on a bus and I'm headed to downtown LA to ditch class and go to a movie in downtown Los Angeles at a theater. And I was going through a really hard time. Like I just didn't want to be in school. I had done all these great things. I'd become president. I was in, the gifted math classes and all of like the good student category, until things just kind of fell apart for me. And I started ditching, and next thing you know, I dropped out of high school. And I'm so grateful that I had a high school principal that noticed that I was missing, and a couple of teachers that noticed that I was missing, and made every effort for me to come back to school. And I had fallen so far behind, about a year behind, that I had to go to adult school at night and makeup classes. And so I went from this like grade A, student, to somebody that dropped out of school within a year. And it was really hard and challenging to get back, to a good place, but I did it. I was able to reach the credits that I needed to reach to graduate, and graduate with my class and on time. And I didn't go to college right away. I, just started working. And I thought that I had this really great job as a receptionist, making $15 an hour in 1998, which was a lot of money. And until the company downsized, and they pulled me aside and they said, "We have two receptionists and we can only keep one. And we're going to have to let you go because our other receptionist is going to college and you're not." That's how they made a decision. And I remember going home crying, feeling so embarrassed. And I thought at that moment, I will never let anyone tell me that I am not good enough or qualified enough because I lack an education. So I made the decision at that moment. I was about 20 years old, to 19, 20 years old, that I would go back to school. And I started going to East LA College, got enough classes and credits to be able to transfer to Cal State LA, went to Cal State LA, graduated, and then a few years later went to USC for grad school. First one in my family to do it. I was figuring it out along the way. So 15-year-old Wendy, who won her 10th grade election for class president, had no idea that even the following year would be so different than what she had expected. And that now, as a grown woman, I'm 40 years old, that this is the life that I would lead. But you know what? It feels right. It feels good to be in a place where I get to represent my community and talk about these stories with young women such as you, because I know that you may have experienced something in your life, or you will experience something in your life. And it is your resiliency and your inner strength that will get you through it. And, if your path changes, be open to what that change could look like, because it can lead you in directions that you never would have expected.
That's amazing. I just want to sit with that for a second. So, obviously you're in the spotlight a lot. Um, can you share with us what are the glamorous parts of your job and maybe the not so glamorous parts of your job?
Thank you. And I see that we have some Garfilians in the chat. It's okay. We could still, Roosevelt and Garfield can still get along. It's the biggest rivalry in all the schools. It's a really tough job. It's a job that is nonstop. And I sometimes think that the general public just doesn't know that it's every day. It's always on call. And that can be mentally draining as well. I think we all have to take a moment to just kind of acknowledge that this past year has been really hard for all of us, and how we take care of ourselves is the number one priority. You need to take time to just make sure that you're okay. It's always fun to go to the parades, the 4th of July parade, the Christmas parade. I get really shy about things like that, believe it or not. So I always take this little one and she becomes the star of the show. This is my little dog Lulu, and I take her to all of the parades, just to kind of take some attention off me. You know, as we say hello to community members and everybody shows up with their dog. But those are the fun parts of the job, when you get to meet people and you get to share in community. And we haven't really been able to do that because of the pandemic. So I'm really looking forward to be able to be outside and be safe and ensure that everyone's vaccinated so that we can return to some kind of normalcy again in a safe way. And I miss that. But the job is hard, and it takes a lot to always be pushing and advocating, but it's important that we do it. And so I'm just, honored to be able to represent.
I love that. And I love that your dog is like right next to you throughout this entire conversation. So, goes without saying, so many challenges along with serving. How do you work with other assembly members who don't always agree with you, especially your Republican colleagues?
It's interesting because the state of California has a Democratic majority. There are more Democrats than in the Assembly and in the Senate, and we have a Democratic governor. There's more Democrats than Republicans, and it's been an interesting space. I've learned how to negotiate with my Republican colleagues, but I've also learned how to negotiate with my Democratic colleagues that are a little bit more moderate than I am, especially if they come from districts that have been flipped, a former Republican seat now being held by a Democrat. Those areas and those votes tend to be a little bit more conservative. And at the end of the day, we have to figure out a way to just push good legislation forward and have the conversations necessary. So I'll share this, I just worked on a really big piece of legislation through the budget process for paid sick leave, for COVID paid sick leave, which means that any worker that works at a company of 25 or more and gets sick, they have an opportunity to be able to take up to 40 hours of paid sick leave without losing their job. So ensuring that workers don't have to make a choice between, am I sick, am I going to go to work, or am I going to stay home and quarantine, or stay home and take care of a loved one that has COVID, or not go take the vaccine because I can't take time off. These are very real, important life choices that people make. And it is our responsibility within the state to make laws that ultimately protect people and protect communities. So this was a really good opportunity for me to negotiate with the members of the Democratic caucus to ensure that we had the votes necessary to push it forward. And so I think in our state, we're in a very different position. But in other states, like in the state of Georgia, we just saw just a few days ago that the governor of Georgia signed legislation that ultimately continues to ensure voter suppression. And so Georgia is not a Democratic state, it is a Republican state, and that's their focus at the moment. We are expanding opportunities for people to vote in California, where other states are actually taking those opportunities away. And so that's the difference of when you have those who are in power and the decisions and choices that they make.
I love that you brought up, the recent legislation. It was a great segue into what I wanted to ask of, what are some things you're working on right now? What are you excited about?
I'm excited for a couple of things that I hope to be able to have all of your support on. One, this is the third time that we introduced this piece of legislation having to deal with women's eugenics and forced sterilizations. In the late 1960s, the state of California had a terrible track record of eugenics, which is at LA County USC Hospital in my district, hundreds of Mexican American immigrant women were sterilized without their consent. There is a really great documentary made about this called No More Babies, No Más Bebés, which tells the story of what happened to these women who were given hysterectomies without them knowing. So they would go in, they were pregnant, had a baby, and the doctor would automatically give them a surgery that would no longer make them available to be mothers. So that happened. And it's been happening in the California Department of Corrections up until 2010, where women who were imprisoned were also forcibly sterilized without their consent. So the state has apologized for these laws and to these women, but nothing has been done to actually compensate or create any kind of support for these women. And so we are pushing legislation as well as a budget ask to ensure that we create a fund for the women from the late 1960s and because of age who are dying, and the women who were forcibly sterilized in prison up until 2010. This is real. This happened here. And we have to do everything we can to make it right, because women's comprehensive reproductive health care includes the right to have a child. And no one should be able to make a decision about women's bodies on whether you can or shouldn't be able to be a mom at whatever point in life you choose to. So we're running that, and we will continue to do that. Another big piece of legislation that we're doing is called the Vision Act. And the Vision Act will stop the collaboration between the Department of Corrections, so the California prison system, and ICE. So no more automatic transfers between our jails and prisons to an ICE detention facility for somebody that is undocumented or has mixed status. Those are not the values of the state of California. And if we truly are going to hashtag abolish ICE, it starts with ensuring that California departments or agencies such as the prison system or Department of Corrections is not collaborating to continue to punish people and separating them from their families. So those are two major pieces of legislation that we're working on. Another one that I would add, and this is part of our pillars on achieving the Green New Deal, is we are banning or eliminating the use of single-use plastic from restaurants or from delivery apps that end up, in your special drawer in your kitchen with all your forks and sauces and all the things, and ultimately are not used and end up in our trash and end up in our ocean and harm our marine life and ultimately harm our climate and harm us. So that's another big piece of legislation to ban the single-use plasticware from the food industry and from deliveries. So those are, I'll just stop right there. 3 major things that are pretty big and pretty significant.
Very significant. Thank you for sharing that. All right, well, I don't want to hog the floor for too much longer. I want to open up the floor to questions from our audience, from our USC student volunteers and our high school girls. So it looks like we have Eve Hazard has her hand raised. So Eve, why don't you go ahead and ask your question, unmute yourself.
Hi. So I was wondering about what it was like a year ago when the pandemic started coming and when we had those first cases of COVID in California. What was it like having this huge virus and disease that you had to start dealing with and transitioning into a different type of working?
Oh, and before you answer that, could you let us know what high school you're from and where you're joining us from?
I'm from Huntington Beach High School. I live in Huntington Beach.
Great, thank you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for the question. I think we were all trying to figure it out. So one of the first steps that I took was connect with our nurses union and the union that represents the workers that work at the hospitals that are in my district, because the conversation was around frontline workers and people that were, heading into the hospital with COVID and not enough respirators. You guys remember that? That was the major conversation is there are no beds, no respirators, no PPP, no protective equipment for our frontline workers. So I wanted to figure out a solution to that. So the LA County delegation, so several of us that represent LA County in the Assembly and in the Senate got together and said, what can we do to figure out a way that we can get, PPE, for our frontline workers, gowns, masks, gloves, shields, right? And because, no one had it around the world. That was a major thing. So we started partnering with seamstresses, just people in the community that started making masks. and they were making masks, and I was picking them up randomly from everywhere, and people were buying cloth, and I was personally delivering them to whichever clinic or nurse a facility or hospital that I could, just to get some additional protections for workers. And then we formed a partnership with BizFed, which is an organization of companies and corporations here in Southern California, and some other organizations as well, that started raising money. And we started figuring out ways that we can talk to vendors ourselves so that we can bring in those resources to our community. But that was the first thing that we did, and it was so important just to get that protective equipment to our frontline workers. And then we started organizing food drives with the Los Angeles Regional Food Bank, and ensuring that the food bank had enough resources to continue to buy food so that we can do mass food giveaways in the community, because people were losing their jobs and had no income coming in.
Great, thank you. Thank you. I'm so happy to see no questions in the chat and nothing but raised hands. Let's hear from Victoria Castle, and let us know what school you're from and where you're joining us from.
Hi, my name is Tori. I go to Redondo Union High School in Redondo Beach, California. And I guess my question is so a lot of people during the pandemic, there was a certain point kind of in spring where everybody was really online and doing everything through Zoom. Was there a point where you had to do everything online? And if so, how did you continue to do stuff and be productive?
Well, great question. We transitioned to digital and Zoom right away. So when I got elected in 2018, my office, I got elected December 2017 and started my job in 2018. And my office was the first one to go completely paperless. So we had these stacks and stacks of binders of legislation that I'd have to carry around and read. And then we decided to just really use technology. So my office was already ahead of the curve, in that we had eliminated being in one place and having documents versus having everything online, which is really the direction that we're all headed, right? That is the future. We're living it now, but it will be even more so in the future. And so we had to figure out a way, and everybody is working from different places. So in our office, we have both the Capitol staff that work in the city of Sacramento, and then we have our district staff, which works in the city of Los Angeles. And getting them and getting our teams together was important. And actually Zoom became a new tool and a new way for all of us to be able to communicate. And it improved the way that we communicate with each other, the way that we transition into a more digital space. But ultimately, I think it also showed us how difficult it is to have broadband, which is still one of our priorities, to ensure that all communities have access to the internet, that our communities also have access to the resources like a laptop, an iPad, a computer, or a smartphone. And even when, I have members of my team that are parents, and some kids are doing distance learning, also ensuring that there's enough equipment, that there's enough broadband, enough internet. And those are all things that I think myself and our team and everyone experience and are just simply try to make it better.
Let's hear from Layla.
Hello. So I'm from John F. Kennedy High School. It's in Granada Hills, but I live in North Hollywood. So I wanted to ask, how did you deal with people that put you down for speaking up, since you are part of the minority group?
Well, thank you for the question. I'll share that when I ran for Congress, because this is a national stage, right? A national opportunity. And I spoke about being formally undocumented. We had threats from the KKK, something that we're like, why would the KKK be interested in my little campaign in Boyle Heights and on the east side? But it was because I represented the growth of our community. I represented what is possible, right? That even though I had these incredible challenges, I was able to be resilient and show a different side of what it means to be an immigrant to this nation. And I was scared. I remember I was scared to even say, or, you're on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram and you're like, I'm at the campaign office, come join us, right? We're gonna knock on doors or make some calls. I was afraid to even say that I was there because I was worried about what that would mean for like volunteers. Would members of the KKK show up? We had talked to law enforcement about just ensuring that we were safe. I had never experienced something like that. But it really took it to a whole new perspective of what it means to truly like stand up for your values and stand firm and stand grounded, but don't stand alone. I was never alone. I felt that I was supported and I felt that I wasn't doing this by myself, which is important in an effort for you to achieve your goals. There's a saying that I'll share. It says, if you wanna go fast, go alone. But if you wanna go far, go together. And that to me was like the changing of what it means to truly like not be afraid and be unapologetic about your position, your values, and what you want to move forward.
All right, I want to get to as many questions as we can here. Let's see if we can squeeze in 2 more. Helena, let's hear from you.
Hi, I go to Los Alamitos High School and I live in Seal Beach. My question is there anything that the California State Legislative can do to help with what's going on at the border?
Yeah, well, we can certainly lead with compassion and empathy, and thank you for the question. We've done a lot of pieces of legislation that actually move California forward in terms of we banned private prisons in the state of California. We have committed to resources to help, and by resources, I mean financial resources, money, to organizations that are working at the border, to nonprofit agencies to ensure that unaccompanied minors and migrant children have resources at the border, have food, have clean clothes, have warm clothes, have a more compassionate approach. I can share with you that President Biden has reached out to the state of California so that the San Diego Convention Center is used as a more humane way to receive the unaccompanied minors that are currently at the border to Texas, because we know that Texas just has different operations and different type of leadership than the state of California does. So here we are amid a pandemic, and I believe that the San Diego Convention Center was also a place most recently used to help the unhoused community. And so now that they're being moved to other resources like Project Room Key or homes or shelters, this center can now be used to help those children. So those are just some of the things that are proactively happening. In my first year on the state legislature, Trump announced that he was going to stop TPS, which is temporary protective status, for Salvadorians and other people that have TPS. Many people that are still refugees have TPS status, which is part of a larger conversation on comprehensive immigration reform. But we fought hard to ensure that in California, TPS recipients were protected. And so we've done a lot and will continue to do, including the legislation that I spoke about earlier, the Vision Act, to ensure that immigrants are protected in the state.
Allie, let's hear from you.
Hi, I'm Allie Matheson. I'm from Culver High School. My question is, what made you want to study journalism and go into the news industry?
I always wanted to tell the story. I always felt that it was important to hear from people on the ground what they were experiencing, a different perspective in terms of how stories are told. In fact, it was one of my teachers in high school, Mr. Gibbs, in 11th grade history, who one day got in a fight with a student in our class, and the student was sent to the principal's office. And we were all in shock, like, oh my God, they were yelling at each other. And eventually Jose, my friend, one who had gotten into the fight, was sent to the principal's office. And Mr. Gibbs had us all pull out a piece of paper and write what we saw. And then we all passed it forward to the front of the class, and he shuffled it and he started ripping them and throwing them in the trash. And he only kept 2 of the 30 students that were in that had written down what they saw. And he said, history is written by those in power. There were 30 people who witnessed what happened, but the story will only be heard from two perspectives, right? And that was, to me, one of the most like eye-opening ways to think about how stories are told. And that's how I saw journalism, and that's how I saw the news, in terms of like, what perspective are we getting? And that's why I was drawn to want to be able to share that story.
All right. Well, our time together has flown by. Assemblywoman Carrillo, is there any parting words you'd like to share with us, and how can we continue to follow your work?
So I would love to invite you all to, consider becoming an intern. We are in the process of looking for interns both in Sacramento and in Los Angeles. And because everything is remote right now, it actually is helpful in terms of like, you could be anywhere in the city of Los Angeles or in the county, and not actually be present, at the office. So if I can, I'm gonna put in my district director's email here in the chat, and my email as well. And if you're interested in an internship or know somebody that is, please let us know. And we're always looking for more support. And I think as we figure out ways to open up, we're going to be doing more food drives and more volunteer opportunities. And there's a Cesar Chavez Action Day that's coming up, which is a huge volunteer day and an opportunity for all of us to do good deeds. And if there's any chance of that, please, our door is always open, and we're always looking for young minds and young women to participate. For the age limitation, I'm actually not sure, but if you can email me, or Maricela, we can find out if there are age limitations. I don't think that there are, but we'll figure it out. And I would just leave you all with this thought. Thank you. Thank you for spending your Saturday morning in a leadership class with other young women, hearing from us in terms of our own journeys. And I hope that you are inspired and inspire others to follow your path and follow your truth and be grounded. I would say that in an effort for you to do the most good while you can, you also have to take care of yourself. Take care of number one, because if number one is not okay, you're not going to be as helpful as you think you may be to your community, to your friends, and to your family. And it's not a selfish thing. Self-care is important. Mental health is important, especially now more than ever. So I would say, take care of yourself, push hard, because why not? The only thing that's stopping you is yourself. Push yourselves to the ultimate limits and honor your ancestors and your family and your parents and everyone who's put the work before you, so that you can continue to push and move forward.
Assemblywoman Wendy Carrillo, we thank you so much for joining us this morning. So joining us today, we have Michelle Manjarrez and, Michelle Phillip and Maria Manjarrez. Too many M's right now. And clearly I need some food in me right now. I want to thank you both for joining. These are living, breathing alums from USC and from this Young Women's Leadership Conference, from the before times when we were all able to be together in a room. But we're very grateful to them for joining us virtually today. So I am going to introduce them. So Michelle Phillip, I'm going to start with. She's a staff assistant at the office of Congresswoman Young Kim. She's worked with many local leaders, including LA County Supervisor Catherine Barger, LA City Council member Paul Krikorian, and Assemblywoman Catherine Baker, and House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy. At USC, she majored in political science and public relations with a Spanish minor. Maria Manjarrez is an executive assistant at Fiona Hutton and Associates. She previously served as the governor appointee to the California Student Aid Commission during her time at USC. And she majored in political science and public policy and served as president of the Unruh Associates. We're so grateful to the both of you for joining us today. We'd love to hear your stories of, how you heard about the conference, what that experience was like, what USC was like, and just, impart some words of wisdom to our girls. So whoever's compelled to want to start first, I'll let you all take it away.
Maria, do you want to go first?
Sure. Okay.
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 So hi, everyone. Thank you for the introduction, Erica. So I heard about the Young Women's Conference when I was 15 years old. So that was the first time I met Erica, Tanya, Christy, everyone. I was very, very young. And I went to this conference, felt very, very empowered, very inspired by everyone. And I made a connection with the director and everyone else. And, years later, I am now a graduate of USC and been able to participate in this conference for many, many years after that. And I'm very privileged to be back here once more.
Yeah, we have very similar stories actually. I was 15 as well, a freshman in high school. And I just heard from my youth and government conference leader that there was this conference going on at USC. So I decided to attend on a whim all the way from the Bay Area. My sister lived in Los Angeles, so I figured I'd stay with her and go to the conference. And at the time, I was really involved in local community, but not so much government. And I got to hear from a lot of really incredible elected leaders and also some folks from USC who inspired me to get involved in my community. And I attended every year since and just graduated from USC in November.
Oh, you're muted.
Muted, sorry about that. Michelle, can you tell us what are you up to nowadays? What is, life? You're a fresh grad.
Yes.
How has that transition been? How is working for young Kim?
It's incredible. It was kind of a whirlwind. It wasn't exactly what I expected. Back in March when the pandemic hit, I actually had a full ride through USC to go to Peru for the summer and study Spanish, but pandemic hit, Peru got canceled, and I was left thinking, what am I going to do? I ended up going to Washington, D.C. to pursue an internship with the Republican leader, fell in love with Washington and the fast-paced environment, and ended up staying here, graduated early and got a job with Representative Young Kim, where I primarily assist our legislative team in the research and development of public policy and our communications team with capturing the Congresswoman's voice and speeches and talking points. And it's been a ride, and I couldn't have done it all without the incredible connections I made at this conference and at USC.
Yeah, that was going to be my follow-up question. How do you feel between the conference, your experience at USC? How has that prepared you for what you're doing now?
I think it gave me the confidence to just go after what I wanted without reservation and to speak my mind. Even though I attended a school that was primarily liberal, living in a state that was primarily liberal, I was still able to find incredible mentors through this conference on both sides of the aisle who could have great conversations and really show me what it is to be a civic servant. And the confidence really is the big part that pushed me to this role.
Thanks, Maria. I want to ask you, I know you have, a kind of not the most traditional path to getting to USC. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey from high school to USC and how that came about?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so I was actually a transfer student. I transferred from Pasadena City College. I transferred as a sophomore. This is why, without exaggeration, I tell people that this conference changed my life, because in high school, I didn't have the best grades ever. They were not up to par for USC, for the schools that I wanted to. And then I met all these wonderful ladies, and then I thought to myself, wow, I really have to get my act together. And I said that I didn't want to settle for a school that I wasn't very comfortable going to. And so I ended up, volunteering here and there and kept a close connection with the Institute and everyone there, and always felt so inspired. So I said, one day I will go to USC. Worked my butt off in community college. I would take like 18 to 20 units per semester in summer school every year round. And then I got my acceptance, and it was all uphill from there. Once I got to USC, I was immediately involved in Under Associates with all the team at CPF. and everyone. So it's just been really great. And I found great mentors that have launched my career to where it is today. One of the stories that I love to tell is that first year I went to the conference, Mona Pascal was the guest speaker, the keynote speaker there. We briefly met. And then when I started at USC, I went to a leadership conference with Sorrel and the center. And Mona Pascal was the keynote speaker there too. And I told her that I had met her when I was 15. And then fast forward, after I was appointed by Governor Brown, he was having his farewell address and she was sitting right in front of me, and everything was just very much full circle. And she remembered me, and it was so great. So again, the connections that you make at this conference with the team, with each other, are truly powerful, and it could really change your life.
Yeah, and for those of you who don't, so Mona Pasquale was a former appointments secretary for then Governor Jerry Brown. So thank you for sharing that, Maria. Can you tell us about, so I know you were a topping scholar. I know you wanted to talk about kind of that part of your USC career journey. Can you tell us more about that?
Of course. So the Topping Scholarship, it's the Norman Topping Scholarship. It's for first-gen low-income students. And what that covers is that, well, now USC has that new policy where if your family makes less than 80,000, you get a full ride, which is fabulous. But now we have to talk about how, besides tuition, there's the full cost of attendance, food, exam prep if you want to go to grad school, study abroad. Not everyone has the financial resources to do that. Well, topping, what it covers, well, the first most important thing is that you find a family within topping, a group of people who share the similar story, similar background as you do, and you really find a family and encouragement here and there. The second thing, the financial aspect, is that they cover $5,000 of tuition per year, but I guess if you meet that threshold, it's not really necessary. So what they do cover is, I've been abroad twice. I went to Paris twice, and fully covered. I had my LSAT, my law school entrance exam course covered by them. I had 2 LSATs covered by them, conferences covered, and I got to take my professors out to lunch, and it was all covered by them. So basically, the whole experience, if you qualify for this scholarship, you're not deprived of anything that other students who are able to fund these activities can. So it's a very, very equity driven program that I encourage everyone to apply to.
Michelle, I want to bring you back into the conversation. Could you tell us about your first internship? How did you get it? What are some tangible tips? Because I really, obviously we want to share with the girls your experiences of the conference and, what you've learned and the connections that you've made, right? But we also want the girls to feel like they have some like tangible tips, like, okay, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z right at 2:00 because I'm ready. Can you both kind of think about, what are some tangible tips? What did you do right at this age to kind of get you to where you are now?
Absolutely. The biggest tangible tip I can give you is to explore local government. There's so many of levels of government to be involved in, from your city council to your local supervisor to even Congress. But all throughout high school, I worked in a candy store at a little chocolate shop, and our local assemblywoman came in to give us a campaign flyer. And I asked her, hey, can I work on your campaign? Because I really believed in her. She was a local mom. Both of her kids went to my school. I'd known her for a long time. I said, hey, can I hop on your campaign? And that was when I was a junior in high school, and I ended up being a volunteer on her campaign. And then over the summer, I got hired to work on her campaign full time. So the biggest advice I could give you would probably be to hop on a campaign as soon as campaign season hits. They want all hands on deck. They'll take just about anyone, no matter what your experience is, and they'll teach you along the way. So if you ever see someone locally who you're inspired by, I would say give them a call. They're never going to turn down an extra hand on a campaign.
Maria, anything you'd like to share?
Yeah, I think one of the things, pieces of advice that I could offer is to never be afraid to ask for help or for mentorship or anything. No, there is no question that is too dumb or anything. One of the quotes I really like that one of my mentors told me is that people like to be used but not taken for granted. So the people are generally very open to sharing their experiences, their networks with you. So really, really take advantage of that, and in turn, reciprocate if they need something. Kind of help them out too. We're all big happy network.
I love that you brought up. Oh, go ahead, Michelle, please.
I was just going to say, adding on to that, another piece of advice that I think was probably from this same conference was, if you don't ask, the answer will always be no. So don't be afraid to just ask. The worst thing that could happen is that someone doesn't respond to your email. But if you email someone and you say, hey, I'm really interested in what you're doing, I'd love to learn more, or take you out to a coffee or a Zoom meeting, the worst thing that could happen is they don't respond. The best thing is that they become your mentor for life. And I would just really encourage you to take that step.
All right, well, I'll just ask one more question, and then I want to open it up to questions from our students here. I love that you both mentioned, the importance of mentorship. Can you share, some impactful, influential mentors in your life, and how they've helped you?
Absolutely. I would say first and foremost would be my mom and my grandma. I was really raised by the matriarchy in my family. And so I really draw a lot of my strength and character from lessons from them. But then on the professional sphere, when I was a freshman, I met the former director of the center, Dan Schnur, and he played a huge role in my life, encouraging me to seek out internships. I took a few of his classes at USC. I'm still in contact with him to this very day. Just gives really great advice, along with some of my other professors, and even teachers in high school can be incredibly valuable in serving as mentors and really leading you in the right direction.
Yeah, that's great. I was going to say the same one, Dan Schnur, but I think also from my time at the commission, there were a lot of really empowered women that I worked with. A lot of them are mothers, so they're juggling motherhood, being a civil servant, and everything else in their life. And no matter at what point in your career you get, I think as women, it's a little tougher. It's a little tougher for us to manage so many things. But what I noticed that each of them did is that they did prioritize a lot of self-care, because you can't expect to manage so many projects and everyone else without taking care of yourself first. That's the most important thing, especially as you start college and your college application process. Really, really, and during a pandemic, really take care of your mental health. I know it seems that everything is super competitive, but also keep in mind that a lot of it is on social media. And in your mind, you might think, everyone might be posting their accomplishments, and your brain might kind of melt them all into one person. So you think you're competing against everyone, but the only competition you have is with yourself. If you are whole with yourself, in touch with yourself, no one can touch you, and you can accomplish anything.
Amazing. I love that. And, I love bragging about both of you. I could literally just spend this entire half an hour singing your praises, both of you. But aside from, I love that you touched on, talking about accomplishments. I want to hear about some really big mess up, some failure. Whether it's in, your current job, maybe a previous internship you had where you just like, wow, I don't know how I'm going to recover from this one. And, what you learned, what you gained from that.
Sure, I can go first on that one. I've failed a lot of times in my life, absolutely. Probably the first one was right before I came to the conference. I ran for a position in school, and I ended up not getting it. Someone on our football team got it, great guy, and I was devastated. I was a freshman. I was so sad that I wasn't school secretary, but picked myself up, dusted myself off, ran again the next year and got it. One of my recent failures is right when I started working for Young Kim. I was walking her and Representative Michelle Steele to the House floor for a vote and I got lost. So I was leading them in circles around the Capitol until I finally ran into a friend and I said, where's the floor again? How do I get there? And they took me in the right direction. And I was so embarrassed, but those two representatives were so kind to me. And, you know, we're all new on the Hill as a new member office. So I just think, you know, you're going to run into obstacles where you're embarrassed or you feel like you don't know everything, but no one expects you to know everything. Everyone knows that as a young woman in politics or a young person in politics that you're learning every day. And it kind of humanizes you a little bit. It's still something that the Congresswoman and I joke about, the fact that we got lost that first day. So don't be afraid to make mistakes and don't be afraid to be a little vulnerable and say, hey, I don't know how to do this. Because believe it or not, people actually want to help you and they don't expect you to know everything. So just don't be afraid to jump in.
Yeah, Michelle, that's awesome. That's really great. And I think for me, the key to confidence is to choose to never be embarrassed. So we all do cringy things, but if you choose, you know what, I'm not embarrassed, you won't feel it anymore. I've learned. Two big failures. One was during college. I was a Truman finalist, and it's this really big fellowship scholarship. And I didn't end up getting it. I was competing against a ton of people, very, very qualified people. I didn't get it. And immediately what my mind turned towards was questioning whether I was, fit enough to go into public service over a scholarship. And then I did a lot of reflecting and I said, I didn't go into public service for an award or for money or for anything. If we're doing it, it's to serve people. This scholarship does not define my goals in my life. And so that immediately shifted my mindset. Mindset is really important. And so a year after that, I was preparing, and I currently am still preparing for the LSAT to go to law school. I spent I got both Michelle and I graduated 2020, right? You graduated in November?
Yeah.
Okay. So I graduated like prime pandemic hit, like my classes switched over and that was insane. I was taking my classes online and everything. And then I was getting ready to study for the LSAT. And so I was trying to juggle everything. And you remember when the whole Black Lives Matter protests were happening, everything. So I was on my phone. Social media was very heavy. Everything was so heavy. And I was trying to balance LSAT studying. So I spent studying for the LSAT the whole summer. I took the exam and I got a terrible score. And I felt so absolutely crushed because you spend all this time not seeing your friends, not seeing anyone, dedicated to one exam that could determine your whole future. And I was in a super rut for a month. And then I picked myself back up and said, I'm not going to let this one failure define me being a lawyer one day, especially as a Latina, where I think 3% of all attorneys are Latina, or maybe less than that. It's up to me to show up for the women who have shown up before me. So I'm still studying, balancing my full-time job, figuring out how the heck I'm gonna mix in studying here. Sometimes it's hard, but I think to myself, this is studying for it is short term, and the benefits I will reap in the long term. So keep going.
I love that. Thank you. Okay, well, I don't want to hog up too much more time here. I want to hear from our high school girls. If you have any questions you'd like to ask of either Michelle or Maria, feel free and raise up a hand here. Or if you want to, plug it in the chat. Asia, all right, go for it.
Hi, this question is for Maria or Michelle if she's gone through similar experiences, but do you mind talking more about your experience traveling abroad or studying abroad? Because I think you mentioned something about going to Paris for part of your college or something.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I went on a Maymester, which means that let's say you're kind of tight on time or not, you can go on a Maymester, which is after, I think we get out of school, in May, mid-May, and you get to go abroad for 4 weeks and then take a 4-unit class. So I took one called Mapping Black Culture in Paris. So voluntary and involuntary migration of African Americans to Paris. And so I did that for a full month. Again, it was covered by topping, which I'm really grateful for, and it counted towards my GE credits. So I had a wonderful time. I read from many, many wonderful Black authors, listened to a ton of jazz over there. It was such a beautiful, beautiful experience. And that requires an application process. I think all of them do. Mainmaster's a little bit more competitive, but if you're very serious about that topic or about learning more about, that topic, I think you can get in. And there are other scholarships too.
Yeah, that's one thing that I didn't get to do. I was accepted with a scholarship to a Mainmaster in Peru, but it got canceled due to COVID, unfortunately. So I definitely recommend going on a study abroad experience, something I wish I had done, but hopefully maybe in the future I will visit Peru and see Machu Picchu. But I did kind of do a little abroad. It wasn't abroad, it was within the country. I went to Iowa for a summer through the Inside Iowa project, which as a born and raised California girl was definitely a cultural shock to me a little bit. So I'd say just exploring programs that take you out of your comfort zone, whether that's abroad or to a different state, can be super beneficial in expanding your network and your mindset.
All right, any other questions for Michelle or Maria? All right. Well, we have, let's wrap this up, and we'll take our group photos again, of course. But before we do, Michelle, Maria, I'm asking this of all of our speakers. Any parting words you'd like to share, words of inspiration to the girls joining us today?
I'm happy to go first on that. I think the fact that you guys are here today says a lot about you and the path you're going to take in life, that you're taking a Saturday out to learn about leadership and learn about the way you can become involved in your community is incredible. And I know all of you will go incredibly far. I would just really encourage you. I know after my first conference, I was nervous to send that email to the folks at USC and to some of the speakers. I didn't know what to say. I thought they would think they were too busy, but the fact that these speakers are here today is because they really care about lifting up that next generation of women. So please don't hesitate to reach out. Don't bunt, follow through. Let them know that you're interested in learning more. And like I said before, the worst thing that can happen is that you don't get an email back and you try again. So if you ever want to reach out to me, mphillip@usc.edu, please feel free. And I just think you guys are all awesome and you're going to do great things.
Yeah, ditto to all of that. I think the advice I gave was kind of scattered through what I was saying, but I will offer this. Once you guys start applying to colleges, one of the things that I really enjoy doing in my free time is reading over personal statements, because I think a good mentor, a good person to read over your statements could make a whole lot of a difference in your application. So feel free to email me, send me your apps. Even if it's like months from now, just say that we met in this, tell me we met in this conference, and I'll read and give you feedback on your essays. So here's my email.
Thank you guys so much for having us today. It was a blast to be back at the Young Women's Conference, and I can't wait till it's in person again.
Yes, thank you. All of the nostalgia. I wish we could be having a dance party during our breaks, but you know what? I'll take this at least. Okay, so we're at the grand finale of our day. This day just zoomed by. I'm so excited to introduce to you this powerhouse of amazing women who have, I think, are all in here at this point. So what I'm going to do first is introduce them, and then I'm going to explain how this breakout room is going to work. So let me first start with introductions. So first I'll start with Tara Campbell. Tara Campbell is the youngest woman mayor in California history, serving the city of Yorba Linda. She was named one of the top 100 most influential people in Orange County by the OC Register, and she's a USC alum. So thank you very much, Mayor Campbell, for joining us. We also have with us Congresswoman Barbara Comstock. Barbara was elected to Congress in 2014. She served 2 terms representing Virginia's 10th congressional district, making her the first woman elected to that seat. She previously worked on both Mitt Romney and George W. Bush's presidential campaigns as a strategic advisor. And we are very lucky to have her this semester at the Center for the Political Future as a Spring 2021 Fellow. We also have Julie Hudash with us. I hope I'm saying your last name correctly. Please correct me if I'm not. She's the founder and CEO of Team Kids, a nonprofit organization committed to empowering children to change the world. Her focus is on youth advocacy issues such as youth development, child safety, and the importance of youth-led activities to help kids thrive. Also a USC alum, and she was captain of her track team here at USC. We also have Tracy Kato-Kiriyama. She's an artist, community organizer, and educator. So great to see you all. She's the director, co-founder of Tuesday Night Project and a presenter of the Tuesday Night Cafe series, which is currently the longest running Asian American produced mic series in the country. As an artist organizer, she speaks and teaches courses on the relationship between wellness, creativity, and community engagement. We also have Shaniqua Mcclendon with us this afternoon. She's the political director for Crooked Media, where she leads their political strategy and civic engagement program, Vote Save America, and also created their successful 2020 volunteer engagement and fundraising campaign. She served on Capitol Hill as a policy advisor to Senator K.R. Hagan and legislative director to Congresswoman Alma Adams. She is also a Spring 2021 Fellow at the Center for the Political Future this semester. We also have Stephanie Ramirez-Zarate with us today, who is a plant lady like myself, I see. Hi, Stephanie. She's a program manager at Hope, which is Hispanas Organized for Political Equality. She previously worked for Assemblymember Monique Limon as a district field representative, and she has experience in political campaign management and engaging first-time voters. We also have Kat Shea with us, who's a dear friend of mine. So this is not hard to brag about one of my mains. She is the anti-hate training coordinator at Asian Americans Advancing Justice in Chicago. Currently in Chicago, but also a USC alum from LA originally. She previously taught ethnic studies, emphasizing intersectionality and student-centered learning. Her anti-bias and anti-racism curricula have been piloted in the Los Angeles Unified School District, as well as multiple charter schools across California. And once upon a time, she and I shared an office at USC, and she has been involved in many young women's leadership conferences in the past. So always happy to have her back. Okay, so that was a lot of talking. Those are all our amazing women who will be joining you today. So now we're going to explain how these breakout rooms are going to work. So we have 7 speakers. We're going to have 3 rounds of 15 minutes. So in just a few minutes here, wow, right on time. Look at that. In like 30 seconds, you're all going to be meeting with one of our women leaders. So you're going to join the breakout room for 15 minutes. Just be wary of time. I would say probably to save some time if you want to introduce yourselves via chat, maybe share where you're joining from, your high school, what year you're in. That way they already have a sense of who's in the room. And then they're just going to share, introduce themselves, talk about their careers, and you can ask pretty much anything you want. So we're going to do that from 1:05 to 1:20. That'll be round 1. Then all of our students, you will stay in your breakout room. Our women are going to rotate to another room. So then from 1:20 to 1:35 will be round 2, same thing. And then round 3 will be from 1:35 to 1:50. So we'll be managing all of this part. That's kind of how this is going to work out. We're going to wrap it up at 1:50. We'll join in the main room. In case you had a burning question that you really wanted to ask someone who didn't get a chance to visit your breakout room, you'll have the last 10 minutes to ask any questions there. So hopefully that all made sense. Any questions about any of that? Seemed pretty straightforward. Okay, All right, so we are going to join our breakout rooms. Everyone, sorry for the technical glitches. Hopefully everyone had a chance to at least ask some questions that they really wanted answered. In the case that you didn't, please, I invite you to feel free and raise your hand. I want to make sure that you're able to ask any questions of any of our speakers. Ria, I know, was just asking Kat Shea a question about her career journey. So, and because I happen to be in that breakout room. So I'm going to pick you, Kat.
Cool. Thanks for that. So I believe she was asking like how I had that trajectory from like working as a congressional staffer into USC and then into teaching. Is that correct?
Yeah, thank you. They're just all such different things, and I'd love to know more about how you connected them and how you transferred skills across.
Yeah, definitely. I think that they're actually like pretty connected. It's all my interpretation of what social impact means, right? My proximity, the proximity becomes different. I mean, it's all like very much based on performance, strong writing skills, project management. Like it's always important to be like a jack of all trades kind of thing. So in that sense, I don't think that there's like a lot of difference. I will say that the thing that I think I grew the most in is from teaching, and that really made me like who I am today. But I can tell you that the story that some of you may already have heard is sort of my trajectory from moving it from politics into a civil rights space and really moving into teaching. So I was a congressional staffer back in 2014. And I remember walking home from the State of the Union. I had already gotten into Teach for America by this point. I didn't know if I wanted to take my placement or not. And I remember coming home for the State of the Union. I was walking home alone and I like really just didn't know what to do. I like lost sleep over whether or not I wanted to stay in Congress or if I wanted to actually be in teaching. And I remember thinking to myself, you know, like what's my legislative portfolio, so to say? I remember thinking to myself, I care a lot about housing, transportation, civil rights, and K-12 education. And I think that there was like a very sort of like nasty set of thoughts that came through my head after that. How can I say that I care so much about housing policy if I myself have never actually had a Section 8 voucher or had lived in public housing before? Why do I get the audacity to have opinions about transportation if me and my family aren't waiting for like the bus that like only comes sporadically? How do I get to have so many opinions about children's education and I don't even have the courage nor conviction to actually be in front of students? And I think that that's when I sort of realized that there are some, not all, but there are some folks who work in politics who say that they actually care about this particular population or this particular community, but most of their time is actually not spent there. How can I say that I care about students and literally not spend most of my time with students? What does that say about me? And how much of that is really reflective on the fact that I would rather sit in a fancy desk and have a fancy office and brag about who I work for than to actually say that I care about community and make sure that my values and actions align. And that's when I realized I had to leave.
That's great. Sydney, we'll take your question and then I'll ask, I want to invite all of our 7 leaders here today to, you know, just to provide some closing remarks, some parting words to our girls. And then I want to share a Google form link to all of you. So Sydney, why don't you go ahead and ask your question?
Absolutely, yeah. My question is for Mayor Campbell. I didn't get the opportunity to be in a breakout room, but I would love to just ask you a quick question. You know, being one of California's youngest female mayors, obviously mayor is a pretty like executive role when it comes to local politics. And I'm curious to know if you have any advice for young women, just very generally, getting into politics, and people might say, oh, you're too young, your voice is too high, things of that nature.
Yeah, don't be deterred by any of that. So I ran at the age of 23, but obviously, and I had a great professor at USC, as some of the students heard this, that gave the advice of shine a light on your problem. And it's not a problem, but shine, you know, show all the positive things that come with being somebody who's young in this role. You're going to have the energy, you're going to have the time to put into it. You're going to be bringing new ideas. And one of the groups I shared this with, but one of my colleagues always says, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. That means we should be at the table, young people. The decisions that are getting made today are going to be impacting us. And so we should be at the table helping make those decisions. So show all the positive things that come with your youth and your age, and that you're bringing a new perspective. You don't want everybody being from the same, background, either professionally or anything like that, to make a decision. And you mentioned being a mayor in that role and being an executive. You are one of 5 for my city. There's still, council members. And so you're making a decision with a bunch of different people. And like I said, you want people from different backgrounds to make sure that you're providing a well-rounded decision. So I'll put my email in the chat, but if anybody has any questions about or tips on running at a young age, feel free to hit me up, and happy to be of help in any way I can.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Tara. Let me go to Congresswoman Barbara Comstock. And if anybody has any questions, please feel free to raise your hand, or if you want to just plug it into the chat really quickly. But any parting words for our women leaders, our young women leaders here?
Well, I just think it's great that on a Saturday, when you could be doing a lot of other things, you're here, focusing on your future as leaders. We need you as leaders. Don't get at all discouraged by a lot of the negativity you see. It is a real privilege. As the mayor was saying, you really can make a difference. And at every stage where you're involved, whether it's being a campaign or staffing the campaign or running the campaign, a lot of young women can run these local smaller races. And the minute you elect somebody that nobody expected to be elected, you're going to be recruited to run the next big race. And we need more women in the campaign field, because we need your voice and your seat at the you need to be at all of these different tables, whether it's the policy table, the legal tables, the in Congress and the State House. So you are needed, and your voices are needed everywhere. So it's exciting that you're engaged and involved like this, and network. When you network, it's not about the who it's when you go out and work and you make those relationships and just continue to expand those people who share your passions and your interests, and that will keep leading to creating your network of not just that you have a list of people that you can call for a job, but they're people who know your value because they've seen it in action.
Thank you. Shaniqua.
Yeah, just a really quick story, all to say that your voice matters. Right before I went to graduate school, I went to graduate school at the Harvard Kennedy School of Government. Someone, I think he's 5 years older than me, maybe, or more, I don't know. But he went to UNC and he went to the Kennedy School as well. And so we connected, and the thing he said to me that stuck out the most was, this experience may be different from what you're expecting, but just really remember that your voice matters. It really matters there, especially as a Black woman. And I was like, okay, cool, thanks. But when I got to the Kennedy School, I realized why he said that. There were, the school lacked diversity tremendously. And I ended up doing a lot of student organizing to help address that. It was not easy. It made my graduate school experience not fun, because some people were really resistant to the changes that me and fellow students were pushing for. But the thing that really stayed with me was him really, iterating, your voice is important and it has to be heard. And although the changes that I wanted to see didn't happen while I was there, some of them did start happening a couple years after I left. And so I just say that to say, things won't be easy. And speaking up is hard. And people, when you are speaking up against things that will disrupt the status quo, people will get upset and angry about it, and they will try to stop you. But it's really important that your voice is heard. Your experiences are important and unique, and they will have an impact, even if it's not in the immediate time that you expect. So just believe in yourself and know that whatever you are contributing is really valuable.
Julie? Is Julie still with us? Oh, there you are.
There you go.
Hi.
I just want to thank everyone for having me. It was great to meet some of the students. Great to be back here with a lot of Trojans, as I was also one. But I just have a couple quick closing comments. One is your voices as women need to be heard. It is just exciting to see all the faces here today, but know that your voice has power. And again, needs to be part of the creating the community change that we need. In my role as CEO of Team Kids, I work with city government, I work with education, but I also work with law enforcement and fire leaders nationwide, which are very male dominated for the most part. And I know that the change that we've created, my voice in that room matters. When we talk with NYPD about mentoring kids in a very rough area in Brooklyn, it may not be the traditional role for firefighters or in law enforcement, but bringing the opportunity to collaborate, to change lives. So I'm sometimes the only woman in a room, but one with a lot of, with ideas to collaborate to change people's lives, kids' lives. And so I would say that. I would also say, leverage mentors. It's amazing. I also shared my email. We're willing to answer questions. I know when I was going through my career path, people I met made a huge difference in my life. I met one police chief, our founding police chief. Well, he's head of Homeland Security now for LAX and all LA airports. He's on a big call with me Monday. He still says he's just the founding police chief. I did a project with Macquarie Bank in New York, a charity project. Well, the person I work with now is in charge of employee volunteerism for PayPal. So Team Kids is doing PayPal's entire Earth Day event because I had a mentor that I followed up with. So when people offer to help, when you meet people that say, gosh, you know what, you are so good at this, you should consider doing that. Let me know if I can help you. Those are people that truly can change your career path. So again, when it comes to mentoring, I would not be able to have the impact I have today without people who met me early on and were willing to open a door or make an introduction. And it's been what has really made a difference. And my final thing, and I know some of you I got to meet in the small groups, but know what your spark is, know what your purpose and your passion is. Build your career based upon what you do that makes you feel most uniquely human and what you're really passionate about, because the world needs that, and you'll make that difference if you stay aligned and you kind of take that journey based upon what your gift and your spark is. But again, thank you. I'm just grateful to be here.
Thank you, Julie. Stephanie?
Thank you. I'm going to keep mine brief. I think what everyone has said is so important. Your voice and your experience matters, especially in this intersection that I kept mentioning in my groups of there's politics, there's policy, and there's public service. And your experience matters in each of those spaces. And so if you find yourself curious about any given field, just knock at a door and find an internship, because that's how you really know that you like this space. And so knock on doors and find yourself some opportunities, because we do need more women in these spaces. So thanks for the invitation, Erica.
Thanks, Stephanie. Tracy.
Yeah, I mean, echoing very fiercely everything that's been said, for sure. I just wrote down 3 words for myself to think about in closing: voice, curiosity, and otherness. And yes, I think in investing in your own voice, investing in your narrative, investing time into your historical voice, your future voice, I think it's incredibly important, absolutely, for you to be heard and for you to share. And I think as you're developing that, I want you to also think about the voice of the other folks who are not in the room with you, whether that be folks in your community, in your neighborhood, folks that are no longer here, the people, your ancestors, those that came before you that never got to utilize their voice. I think in developing our own sense of self, we have to look at other and otherness. You all know in some way, shape, or form, and probably many shapes or forms, what it means to be othered. So please remember that. And I think that generosity in like thinking about self in relation to other is so critical in sort of investigating voice. Be as curious as you can be all the time. I will say this till I die. Every interaction is an opportunity. Every interaction is an opportunity. Every interaction is an opportunity. Be curious, ask questions. And just know that you have all the intersections to explore, right? And all of your intersectional sort of voices need to be heard and connected with. So I really just thank you for this time. It's really awesome to be here.
Thank you, Tracy. And Mayor Campbell and Kat, feel free to jump in here. I know we've kind of heard from you both already. I wanted to make sure to give everybody an opportunity. But any other words either of you would like to share before we wrap this up? I know we're a little over time here. Thank you all for sticking through to the end here. All good? Okay.
Kat,
I could, yeah, Tara, you go.
No, I was just gonna, everyone touched on it. Yeah, we need more women voices. I just want to reiterate, don't wait till you're older in life to get involved and give back. You can do it today. You know, the requirement to be 18 to run for office, you can even get involved now before that, or 18 to vote, either way, but you can get involved today. So don't wait, reach out to the people who are on this call, and happy to help you guys. So thanks for joining on a Saturday. Go ahead, Kat.
Thanks a lot. Also good to see you again. I just want to say, it sounds like there's a lot of folks who've talked a lot about voice, you know, as sort of our closing statements, and I hope to push that just a little bit. There's more than one way to show up as a leader. There's more than one way to also use voice. And I say that literally and figuratively. Maybe you're a strong writer. Maybe you do actions. Maybe you're a person who builds connections together. So I hope that when people tell you to like use your voice, I hope you expand that definition so it actually works for your personality. Because I know not everyone actually likes to literally speak, but that doesn't actually diminish the kinds of things and changes that you'll be able to make. The second thing that I've also mentioned in one of my breakouts is I want you to actually challenge the idea of big impact versus small impact. I believe personally that there is no such thing. As I had mentioned in a breakout room, you can't tell me that like me actually like affecting the life of a child for the rest of their lives is a smaller impact than making systemic policy. So I really challenge like what is more impact or less impact. I actually think that that's a false binary and it is a fallacy. And then the last thing that I hope you also think about of like whatever it means to be a leader, whatever it means to make change, I hope that this is humbling to think about the fact that you're not actually the one who determines that. You don't determine whether or not you're a leader. Other people and how they show up for you, your actions and how people are affected by what you do and what you say, that is your demonstration of whether or not you've made an impact and how you've been able to touch people's lives. And I hope that that will continue to sort of like drive towards what it is that you are working towards, especially when you feel the most lost. I'm also going to just let you know that I put in a sample email of like how to connect with someone. I sent it to Erica and she'll be able to share it all with you. And hopefully that helps a little bit because I know that for some folks, reaching out via email can be like really daunting. And then for those of you who may feel lost, I usually take what's called the values assessment. So then this way, when you are going to those mentors or talking to people, hopefully you can find those buzzwords to be like, oh yeah, Tara is dope. I think she's going to be my woman, right? And hopefully you'll be able to parse out who are the people you want to stay connected to.
Thanks, Kat, so much for that. All right, so we made it. This time just like flew by today. I added it also in the chat. I know it's like a lot of links going through. We're going to compile all of these resources. We'll be emailing them to all of you. I just want to give you a round of applause for joining us for the whole thing. If I had a trophy, I would mail it to each of you. So proud of you all. You know, this is always just the highlight of the semester for our team. Kami, I don't want to put you on the spot, but anything you'd like to share before we wrap up?
Sharing gratitude, of course, to all of the women leaders who have been sharing their stories and inspiring and guiding. That was the whole point of today, inspire and guide. And to all the young women from all over Los Angeles, all over California, and from other parts of the country and even outside of the country, thank you for spending your Saturday with us. It is an investment in yourself. Those are often the best investments. We know that when people tell you you can't, you've just heard so many people tell you, yes, you can. And that's what this Young Women Leadership Conference is all about. So please do keep in touch with the Center for the Political Future. We're grateful for you. Erica, you did a terrific job today. Thank you so much for leading today's conference. And I know you have a certificate of participation for any students who do want to receive some sort of proof that they were here and maybe pad their resume a little bit. So how do they get one of those?
Yeah, so that is also in this Google form. So, we want to get your information. So we make sure to spell your name correctly. Just hit yes, you want that participation certificate, and we'll send it to your inbox along with the resources shared throughout the day today. And, of course, completely optional, but would love to hear your feedback on the day. We really hope by this time next year, we can all do this again in person and we can end with a dance party. But until then, we'll just say thanks to all of you. Go change the world, go be badasses, and fight on.